Welcome to the laws of Shabbat. This will be part 31 of the class. Today's topic, leaving food on an open fire and other laws that pertain to the laws of Shabbat. Rav David Yosef Shlita begins. Mi she'avar al isur derabanan b'Shabbat. If somebody transgressed a rabbinical prohibition on Shabbat. In part 30, we learned that if a person went ahead and he transgressed a rabbinical prohibition on Shabbat, we gave a few examples. For example, he separated truma, ma'aser, or he went ahead and he did hafrashat chala. In all of those cases, we explained that if it was done by accident, you are allowed to go ahead and benefit from them on Shabbat itself. However, what happens if it was done knowingly, intentionally? We said you're not allowed to benefit from it on Shabbat. You have to wait until after Shabbat. So comes Rav David Yosef and he tells us, and he says, when we're speaking about the rabbinical prohibitions which you're not allowed to do on Shabbat, where we said that she'im haya hadavar b'meizid, that if it was done intentionally, asur l'shamesh u'lehanot me'ot davar ad achar Shabbat, that if it was done intentionally, you're not allowed to use or benefit from that thing until after Shabbat, whether that person, he himself who did it, or whether other people, we're going to apply this law even to the cases of ma'arit ha'ayin. Ha'ayin, which means to say, even in things where the rabbis forbade la'asotam b'Shabbat, to do them on Shabbat, mishum ma'arit ha'ayin. Even on things which is applicable to the laws of Ma'arit Ha'ayin. Ma'arit Ha'ayin is what onlookers are going to say. So basically, we have laws where the rabbis enacted it on Shabbat that you're not allowed to do them. For example, separating Truma, Ma'aser, or Hafrashat Chala, the rabbis enacted those laws that you're not allowed to do l'chatchila. But if you did do it by accident, b'di'evid, we're going to tell you you're allowed to use them on Shabbat, you or anyone else. Now, what happens with the laws of Ma'arit Ha'ayin? There are also laws where the rabbi is enacted because of what people might say. So l'chadchila, you're not allowed to do them, but if you would do them, if it was by accident, we would allow you to benefit from them on Shabbat. But if it was done intentional, even though it's only because of what the onlookers are going to say, still we're going to tell you you're not allowed to benefit from that on Shabbat, not the person that did it and not anyone else until after Shabbat. And that's what he's telling us over here. Even in things where the rabbis forbade one to do them on Shabbat, it's only because of what people are going to say. So you would have thought, what's the big deal? I did it. I could benefit. No. If you did it by accident, okay, you were not allowed to do it. But if you did it by accident, okay, we're going to give it to you. We'll allow you to benefit. But if you did it knowingly, then we're going to tell you are not allowed to go ahead and benefit from them, not you and not anyone else, until after Shabbat. Nevertheless, we should emphasize שפעמים שאסור ליהנות ממעשה שבת בשבת עצמה, at times it's forbidden for one to benefit that thing that a person did on Shabbat, even on Shabbat itself, even in things where the whole prohibition to do them is only from the rabbis. So, look, in part 30 we learned about things that you're not allowed to do them lechatchila. But if you did do them lechatchila, b'di'evid will allow you to use it. Now he's saying that there are certain rabbinical prohibitions where they don't allow you to do it lechatchila. And if you did do it b'di'evid, we're not going to allow you to use it. Rabotai, this is a very important rule. When we speak about rabbinical prohibitions that they enacted on Shabbat, there are certain rabbinical prohibitions that lechatchila I don't want you to do it. But if you did it b'di'evid, I will allow you to use it. But there's certain halachot Lechatchila, we don't want you to do it. And if you did it, b'di'evad, we will not allow you to use it. And these are the halachot that he's gonna bring some cases right now. He says, okay, go on, and for example, be'isur shhiya. What is shhiya? Leaving a pot of food on an open fire. Dahainu, so he explains. If a person plays on an open fire, me'eruv Shabbat on Friday afternoon, samach likinisat Shabbat, close to the Shabbat coming in, tavshil shitchil leitbashel, food which began to cook, me'at, a little bit, ve'adan eino ra'ui la'achila afilu midoichak, and still it's not fit for consumption. Even if you wanted to push yourself and force yourself to eat, you can't eat it. It's not edible still. It's forbidden for one to eat this food on Shabbat. Even if you did it by accident. And we're going to see many more cases. Now, before we continue to those cases, I want to try to go ahead and elaborate on this last piece, a very, very important piece. A lot of times you have women that on Erev Shabbat, especially now, Shabbat is coming in early. So they don't really get the time to prepare everything, especially if they're working. They come home 2 o'clock. So what do? It happens many times that, they forget the bach. Somehow the bach is like the last thing on their mind. So what's bach? Number one, for those that do not know what bach is rice with meat and cilantro. So what do? They would take it, they take the rice and the meat and the cilantro, they mix it, and they put it into a cooking bag. Now they put it into a hot water, meaning into a pot with water, and they allow it to cook. Here's the problem. Let's say if you had a lady on Erev Shabbat, let's say Shabbat was 4:30. On 4:25, she sees she has no time. But she knows her husband's gonna, he likes to sit on Shabbat, he sings songs, he learns Torah. So he says, by the time I'm going to serve the bach, it's going to be 5 hours into the night. So that's enough time for me to cook the bach. So what does she do? She takes the bach, she puts it into cold water, which is inside the pot, and she puts it on an open fire. That, Rabotai, is called shhiya. Leaving uncooked food. Because there has to be at least a third to at least get one opinion in to allow you to leave it on open fire. But Rabotai, let's not touch those halachot. Let's say a woman went ahead and she placed food which is not edible on Erev Shabbat and an open fire, like the case with the bach. Now comes 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, she went to serve the bach. And she tells the husband, you know when I did this? Literally 5 minutes before Shabbat. The husband says, what? He knows the halachot. He can't eat it. 1 second, but it's a rabbinical prohibition. You're right. The Torah states you're not allowed to cook on Shabbat, not before Shabbat. The rabbi said you can't even cook something prior to Shabbat going into Shabbat. Meaning, if something is not fully cooked, or even if it's not a third cooked going into Shabbat, you can't leave it on open fire. That's why we have the metal sheets, or that's why we have the electric plate. That's why we try to avoid a lot of issues on Shabbat. But comes Rav David Yosef and he says something very fascinating. This that we spoke in part 30 of the class regarding Truma, Maaser, and Chavrashat Chala, and according to the Ashkenazim, even the Tvila, the dipping of the Kalim into the Mikvah, all those are also rabbinical prohibitions. However, over there we don't want you to do them lechatchila. But if you did do it by accident, b'di'evad will allow you to benefit from it. But in these rabbinical prohibitions, what we're about to learn with Shia, Hatmana, Chazara, in all of these cases, they're also rabbinical prohibitions. Lechatchila, we don't want you to do it. And if you did do it, b'di'evad, we're not going to allow you, even if it was by accident. So Rabotai, you can have rabbinical prohibitions where you're not allowed to do it, and if you did it, it's okay. And at the same time, you can have rabbinical prohibitions where you're not allowed to do it, and if you did it, it's not okay. And these are one of them. All right, so let's see that one more time inside. Therefore, the Isra of Shia, leaving food on an open fire. Very big problem. So the case with the woman, the Bach, not only the case with the woman, the Bach. I one time went to a house on Shabbat where, Rabotai, the lady had 4 burners on. So I asked, where is the blech? I don't need a blech. I said, what you don't need a blech? I don't like blech. It doesn't cook the same way. So, Rabotai, put it to you like this. I had to take out some metal sheets. Not even, I think they're made for grilling or something like these. And I had to put it on top of the fire in order to avoid all these problems. But if I wouldn't be there, she says every Erev Shabbat, simple. She doesn't rush, she doesn't drive herself nuts. She comes, bachs, oshpoche, all types of food. She has the burners on, she leaves it. And into Shabbat, as they're cooking, she goes one by one, she takes it and she serves. And what's wrong, she said. That's a problem, you're not allowed to do it. This is it, you're not allowed to do it. But Rabotai, again, they think they're keeping Shabbat. But there you go, you're not, Rabotai, it's a very big problem. In any event, so this is Shir, Isur Shir. So now Rav David Yosef explains. Da'ainu, which means to say, She'nich al gabesh gilu yom erev Shabbat. If a person left on an open fire at the afternoon of Shabbat, samuch, close to the Knesset Shabbat, close to the Shabbat entering, what did he put on the fire? What did he put on the open fire? Tafshil she'itchil litbashel mi'at. A food which began to cook a little bit. But still it's not edible. Even if you want to eat, you can eat it. Therefore he says, you're not allowed to eat this you're not allowed to eat this food, even if it's cooked on Shabbat already, it's fully cooked. You're not allowed to eat it. You're not allowed to eat it on Shabbat itself. Even if you did it by accident, Botai. This is the difference. Here we go. Even if you did it by accident. So we see over here we have Shia. We learned another concept today. Shia, leaving uncooked food on an open fire and then wanting to eat on Shabbat cooked food. That cooked food, you're not allowed to eat it. It's asur. And even if you did it by accident, Rabotai, that's the whole beauty of it. Also, if a person went ahead and he transgressed the prohibition of insulating food, you're not allowed to insulate food on Friday afternoon. So Rabotai, there's a lot of laws when it comes to hatmanam. I'm going to give you one simple example. If a person will go ahead and they take food and they insulate it into an insulation where it gives off heat, you're not allowed to eat that food on Shabbat. And so too in the prohibition of returning food on Shabbat itself. He explains, Dahainu, for example, which means to say, a person went there and he placed on Shabbat a fully cooked food on Shabbat itself, al gabe esh guluya, on an open fire. Rabotai, this is called Chazara. Tavshil shenitbashel kol torko al gabe esh guluya. If he took a food which is fully cooked, let's say, person, I don't know, to take any food, a person took a food which is fully cooked and he put it on an open fire. This is called Chazara. It's called returning the food on an open fire. So now he explains the conditions. If because of what he did, the food, it enhanced more, asur l'ochlo b'Shabbat. You're not allowed to eat the food on Shabbat. So what do you think? You said you think you're doing nothing wrong. Look at many things you're not allowed to do. Even if you did it by accident. And for sure if you did it intentional. Rabbi, I want to just, before we continue to the next piece, comes Rav David Yosef and he speaks about Chazara, returning food on an open fire. What are you doing, Rabotai? What are you doing? Let's say, I don't know, I don't cook, so I don't know. Right, but I'm just going to take any example. Let's take chulin. Let's take oswa. I don't know. Comes the wife, she serves the husband chulin, oswa. He takes it, he eats it, says, I I don't like it. I need it to be more, cook it more. But it's already fully cooked. It's fully cooked, but the more it cooks, the better it is. Okay? It becomes more congealed, whatever. So, she says, okay. The wife says, what am I doing wrong? She takes the food, this osvo, or this chulin, and she puts it back on the open fire. Not allowed to do it on Shabbat. If she did it, since the fire, since the fire enhances the food, you're not allowed to eat that food on Shabbat. The husband can no longer eat it. You're going to tell me, Rabbi, he didn't know the halakha. Doesn't matter. He knew, he didn't know, not allowed to eat it. Accident, intent, doesn't matter. That's what he tells us over here. Because of what he just did, the fire enhanced the food more. Asur lecholo b'Shabbat. You're not allowed to eat it on Shabbat. Even if you did it by accident. And for sure if you did it intentional. Now, all that is when the fire enhances the food. But what happens, Rabotai, the wife, I don't know, let's say, she gave him Friday night, she gave him bachsh. Well, she gave him bachsh. Saturday morning, he wants to eat the bachsh. So he says, go reheat it for me. Reheat the bachsh for me. So she doesn't have an electric plate. She doesn't have the metal sheet on the fire. She puts it directly on the fire. Now, Rabotai, in my humble understanding, the way I understand, bachsh, the more you keep it on the fire, not with water, the more you just keep the rice on the fire, in a pan, it's only going to get dry, it's only going to become worse. So that's what we're going to speak about. What happens, he says the other way. What happens if the food, it doesn't enhance, not the food, if the fire doesn't enhance the food, it destroys, it is detrimental to the food. If the fire is detrimental to the food, it's a different halakha. Look, aval, however, imu mistamek veralo. However, if this is what he did, putting the food on the fire, it's mistamek veralo. Mistamek literally means it constrains. Veralo, and it's bad for him. So basically, we say it in English, it's basically one word. Mistamek veralo, it's one word. If the fire is detrimental to the food, that's how we say it. Yesh lahakel leochlo va'afilu b'Shabbat. One can be lenient and eat it even on Shabbat. Va'afilu be'asaken b'mezid. Even if he did it intentional. He did it intentionally. Share eino nehena meha'isur she'asa. Since he's not really benefiting from the prohibition. But when, Rabotai, when is that? Imhu adayin cham. If this food, if this bachsh is still hot, then we're going to tell you, since he's not really benefiting from the Isur, because remember, so I gave you, I gave an example where he had the bachsh on Friday night, and then he asked his wife to reheat it on Saturday morning. That's a problem, because we're going to see right now that all that we allow you to go ahead and eat the food, that specifically if the food was hot, when she went back and she reheated it, and it's detrimental to it. But if it was cold, we're going to tell you you're not allowed to eat it. All right, so maybe I wanted to give you the example of the cold just to show you that a person, just to show you what means, what's detrimental to the food. So let's do this one more time. Aval, however, imhu misamek viralo. If the fire is detrimental to the food, yesh lakel lochma afilu b'Shabbat, you're allowed to be lenient and eat it even on Shabbat. Afilu be'asakim b'mezid, even if you did it intentionally. Because you're not benefiting from the prohibition. What prohibition did you do? If the bachsh was hot, and now you're putting it back in the open fire while it's hot, what prohibition did you do? Yeah, the food is destroying you, but what prohibition did you do? That's what he says, as long as the food is still hot, we're going to tell you you're allowed to benefit from it on Shabbat, even if you did it intentionally. Again, you're not allowed to do it. But if you did do it, you did a prohibition, you'll be held accountable. You have to do teshuvah. But we're going to tell you allowed to eat that food on Shabbat. Aval, however, here we go. What happens, the case like I told you initially, what happens if the food was cold? She gave it to him Friday night. And after the dinner, they put the food back into the refrigerator. And then she went and she heated it up Saturday morning. Yesh leosor lochlo b'Shabbat. You should forbid eating that food on Shabbat. Because now you're benefiting from the prohibition, which is what Rabbi, the prohibition is by you going ahead and you putting it back on the fire and allowing the fire to heat up the food. So basically, you benefit from the prohibition of returning the food on an open fire. That's why he says you should not be lenient and you should leave it until after Shabbat. Okay? So let me just say this concept outside. If a person went ahead and he put food on an open fire, and the fire is detrimental to the food, even if you did it intentional, you're not allowed to do, but even if you did it intentional, if the food was hot, we're going to allow you to go ahead and benefit from that food on Shabbat. But if the food was cold, and you went ahead and you reheated the food, then we're going to tell you that it is asur to eat it on Shabbat, since you are benefiting from the prohibition of returning cooked food on an open fire, because that you're not allowed to do. All right, let me read it one more time. I just want to make sure everybody has it clear. However, if by placing the food on an open fire, the fire is detrimental to the food, you can be lenient and eat it even on Shabbat. Even if you did it intentional, because you're not benefiting from the prohibition that you did, because you did a prohibition, which is what? By putting cooked food on an open fire. The prohibition is placing food on an open fire. You did a prohibition, but you're not benefiting from it. Why? Because we explained, because we said inhu adayin cham, because since it's still hot, so you're not benefiting from the fire. Aval, however, but if it was cold, and you heated it, and you reheated the food, you should forbid it eating on Shabbat, because now he's benefiting from the prohibition of returning cooked food on an open fire, and that fire is heating up the food. Now, that was if the food is, we spoke about if it enhances the food. If the fire enhances the food by accident, intentional, doesn't matter, you're never allowed to eat it. If the fire is detrimental to the food, we said, even if it's by accident, you're allowed to benefit, even on Shabbat itself, as long as it was hot. But if it was cold, and then you reheat it, even if it's detrimental, we're going to tell you, you are not allowed to go ahead and you're not allowed to eat it on Shabbat. Okay, now, we're going to speak about, going back to the first case, what happens if a person did chazara on Shabbat, which means you took a fully cooked food and you placed it on an open fire on Shabbat, but the fire enhances the food, where we said you're not allowed to eat it. Let's see something over here. In regards to a food which is fully cooked, and the fire enhances the food, that you went and you returned it back in an open fire in a prohibited way, because you're not allowed to put it on an open fire. If you went ahead and you did that on Shabbat, we said nobody's allowed to benefit, correct? We said that even if you did it by accident or if you did it intentional, nobody's allowed to benefit. So he wants to clarify that halakha. It's like this. When we said this whole halakha, that if the fire enhances the food, where we said even if it was done by accident, or even if it was done intentional, and we said nobody's allowed to eat from it, he clarifies that ruling and he says, who's that nobody? The person himself who cooked, who reheated that food on an open fire, and also if the person went ahead and they cooked it for other people in the household. However, aval, here we go, there's an exception. Aval la'acherim. But if it's for other people, let's say a guest walked in after all this happened. He sees the whole house is sitting, nobody's eating the children. Right? Because the fire enhanced, no? What happened? He likes it. So they say the whole story. Okay, they're not allowed to eat, but I could eat it, right? But when it comes to other people, mutar le'chol tav shel zeh b'Shabbat atzma. He's allowed to eat this cooked food on Shabbat itself. When? Kol she'aya davar b'shoigeg. As long as this whole incident happened in an accidental way, where either she forgot that today was Shabbat, or either she knew it was Shabbat, but she did not know that you're not allowed to return fully cooked food where the fire enhances the food and an open fire. She didn't know that. So bottom line over here is, Rabotai, even though we explained earlier that when it comes to enhanced food, where the fire enhances the food, we said clearly, whether it's by accident or intentional, nobody's allowed to benefit from it. Comes Rav David Yosef and he clarifies that halakha. Nobody is the person that did it. Nobody is for whomever it was done. But other people that were not part of this incident are allowed to benefit from it, and as long as it was done by accident. But if it was done intentional, even that person who was not included in the incident is not allowed to benefit from that food. Of course, Rabotai, until after Shabbat. Now, Rabotai, this that we said, a person is not allowed to eat from the food until after Shabbat. Okay, how long until after Shabbat? Because remember, you have to remember, we have this concept of Bikadeshi Yasu, the amount of time that it takes to cook something, to reheat something, right? Depending on the situation. So he says like this, there are those that say, Asur lo le'ochlo afilu b'mot Shabbat ad acher sheyavor shiur zman b'kadeshi yasu. Now, going back to our case where the fire enhances the food, we said the person that did it, or the person that it was done for, they're not allowed to eat it on Shabbat. They have to wait until after Shabbat. So how long do you have to wait until after Shabbat? Shabbat comes out, let's say, 5:30. When can I eat it? So one opinion says that it's forbidden for him to eat it, even on Mot Shabbat, until he waits the amount of time that it passes, that it took him to reheat that food on Shabbat. So let's say they waited 15 minutes. Let's say that it took the heating process to make the food better, 15 minutes. So after Shabbat, you have to wait 15 minutes. 45 minutes, so after Shabbat, you have to wait 45 minutes. So let's give you an example. In a situation where the fire enhances the food, say the person waited an hour on Shabbat. So we said nobody's allowed to benefit except outsiders, but everyone else, the household, the person himself, nobody's allowed to benefit. Okay. These people that are not allowed to benefit, when can they eat it after Shabbat? So one opinion says they're allowed to eat it after Shabbat until they wait for the time to pass what it took them to enhance the food on Shabbat. In our case, let's say it was an hour, so if Shabbat comes out at 5:30, they have to wait till 6:30 before they can consume that food. No, and other rabbis learn no. Some rabbis learn no, he's allowed to go ahead and eat that food immediately right after Shabbat comes out. So bottom line, Rabotai, you have some rabbis are going to learn Asur lo le'ochlo afil b'mot Shabbat ad acher shavor shur zman b'kadesh yasu, that it's forbidden for him to eat the food after Shabbat until he weighs the amount of time that it takes the food to get enhanced, 50 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever amount of time it was on the fire on Shabbat, that's how much you have to wait after Shabbat. No, you're allowed to go ahead and eat the food immediately after Shabbat. Rabotai, we're going to do a summary for part 30 and also part 31. The first case we spoke about, shogeg, unintentional. If one violated a rabbinic prohibition on Shabbat by mistake, the result or product is permitted for use and benefit both to him and to others, even on Shabbat itself. Few examples we gave: separating truma, chala, or cooking vay toldot hachama. What about if it was done intentional, mazid? If done intentionally, use and benefit are forbidden on Shabbat for everyone, but permitted after Shabbat. Regarding the Tvilat Kelim, immersing new vessels on Shabbat, permitted lechatchila for Sephardim, but we did see Rav David Yosef say that the custom is, if it's possible, give it to a non-Jew as a present, and then take it back as a loan, and then you could use it on Shabbat. For Ashkenazim, if done even intentionally, may still be used on Shabbat. If you went ahead and you dipped the new utensil into a mikvah where they are stringent, they don't want to do it, but if they did do it, even intentionally, we're going to tell they're allowed to go ahead and use it even on Shabbat itself. Rabotai, exceptions when it comes to shogeg. Even by shogeg, some rabbinic melachot remain forbidden to benefit from on Shabbat, such as shhiyah, leaving uncooked food on open fire before Shabbat, hatmana, insulating food, chazara, returning food to the fire. Now, there is a difference when it comes to returning food to the fire. If the dish improves, mistamek v'yafelo, right? Like we said, if the fire enhances the food, it is forbidden to eat on Shabbat. Whether you did it by accident, whether you did it intentional, doesn't matter. You're not allowed to eat it on Shabbat. You have to wait until after Shabbat. If it worsens, mistamek viralo, it may be eaten. Whether it happened by accident, whether it happened intentionally, you're allowed to eat it on Shabbat. The person himself and everyone else. After Shabbat, when it comes to the case of where the food is improved because of the fire, or it's enhanced because of the fire, some opinions require waiting kadeshi asu, the time it would take to heat up, while others permit immediately after Shabbat. Rabotai, have a great day. Baruch Adonai L'olam. Amen ve'amen.